Jefferson Elementary School District to order at 7 p.m. Ms. Coveray, can we get roll call, please?
Ms. Leah Inga Anuai,
Here.
Mr. Aaron Rashba,
Here.
Mr. Shakil Ali,
Here.
Mr. Anthony Sujisaka,
Here.
Ms. Andrea Jordan.
Here. That was unanimous. We are now moving to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Scott, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Ready, begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to move to the approval of the agenda. Are there any adjustments?
Yes, I do have one adjustment. We're going to ask to remove item 7G, Community School Planning Grant Updates. We're going to table that to another meeting.
Thank you, Ms. McCulloch. Is there any other adjustments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. We're going to be moving on to communications, board acknowledgements, and commendations. And this time I'm going to start on my left.
Nothing this time, but just looking forward to a great meeting. Also, welcome back, Manufo.
Y'all pass.
I just want to commend FDR and Garden Village for launching the reading rally done through the PTA, and had a great experience this week reading to Ms. Lynn's second, third grade class at FDR, and I understand that we have had 72 guest readers come in. I'll first say that they've done some good fundraising through the program, but to hear that 72 people have come in and done reading for different classes, I think is the greatest benefit of all. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
I just want to extend my gratitude and grace to the board and the district for their patience. As many of you may know, I'm one of 22, so I come from a big family, and I've been missing some meetings. And I'm in the middle of 5 family funerals, and I just came from one today. So I'm grateful for every day, and I just want to say thank you to everyone for your understanding.
I echo my fellow trustee sentiments. I was also at FDR, so I was one of the 72, and so it was really great to sit in and read to students. What really stood out to me, realized that I've been in the district for a really long time. One of the children in one of the classrooms remembered me from reading to them in TK at Garden Village, but they're at another school now. So I realized that it doesn't matter what school our children are in, they're children of our district, and we are going to support them and make sure that they are well prepared for the future that's ahead of them. So I was very blessed to have that ability this past week, and I look forward to obviously the fundraising I think is ending tomorrow for Garden Village. So for anyone that has not donated yet or has not encouraged their child to read this evening, please do so. And with that, we're moving on to superintendent comments.
Yes, we did receive one communication from the Deputy Superintendent at the County Office of Communication, Kevin Bultima. And the communication said, the County Superintendent of Schools Office has reviewed the 2022-23 unaudited actuals financial reports of Jefferson Elementary School District and California Virtual Academy in accordance with Education Code Section 42100 and transmitted the reports to the California Department of Education. So we're just acknowledging receipt. It was sent to me and President Jordan. Also, next Tuesday is Halloween, and so it is a minimum day for students. So we just want to remind everyone to be safe and enjoy the celebrations.
Thank you. And now we're moving on to item 5C, persons wishing to address the board. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on or address the board on any issue that is under the board's jurisdiction and not on the agenda. The maximum time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. Do we have any speaker cards today? Seeing as we do not, I will close public comment. We will now be moving on to our general functions. Item 6A, the consent agenda. The administration recommends approval of the start items on the rest of the agenda. If there are no adjustments, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
There is a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. We'll be moving on to item 6C, resolution number 231025B, to excuse trustee Liaiga Anoa'i from the regular board meeting October 11th of 2023. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Now we're going to be moving on to item 6D, Measure T parcel tax renewal feasibility survey results. This is an information item. Jefferson Elementary School District Measure T parcel tax will sunset on June 30th of 2026. In 2016, voters approved Measure T parcel tax to protect core intervention programs, math and literacy, enhance music and art programming during or after school, and support the library programs, technology, books, furniture, etc. Revenue from this parcel tax has funded our school libraries, ethnic studies curriculum, and training, art and music instruction, classroom interventions, and our youth cinema project at 4 elementary schools. Brian Good, president of GOB Research, will present via video call on the Measure T parcel tax renewal feasibility study results.
So we're having a little technical difficulty. Give me just a moment. He says he's in a waiting room, but I don't see him. So
No
I'm
worries.
trying to get him logged in here. It should show up if you, do you know how to check if there's a waiting room? I thought it would show up. Mm-hmm. It says it's the same. He's in the waiting room. Since it's really audio, I can just call and put him on. Yeah, that's our backup. Oh, sorry. Never mind. That's my phone number.
Bear with us. We will resume momentarily.
That's just for us.
So I'll turn on the camera on this. We're just trying to find
I didn't think it did either. I realized though that it was my phone number that I was looking in the email. My apologies. I thought this would work smoothly. Well, no, because it has to be set up on that computer. Is he in? No, that's up.
That's him. Yeah.
All right, let me turn on the microphone. All right, Brian, can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Isn't this
He
supposed to light
cannot
up?
hear us.
I think this is
It
supposed
is
to
light,
up.
it's lit up right here.
Can you hear us?
Is it out of the right microphone?
We can hear him now.
You can hear him?
Yeah.
We can hear him. I don't know if he can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Try again.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. Thank you. Woo. So we are on the first title slide. So you can just let us know as you move through when to advance the slides. So this is Brian Godby from Godby Research, and he is going to share the results of the feasibility survey. Go ahead, Brian.
Great. Okay, well, let's move to the overview and research objectives slide. All right, as you know, we were commissioned to conduct a survey for the district, and we started with a few warm-up kinds of questions that dealt with the overall climate in the district, quality of education, effectiveness management, managing taxpayer funds, and the need for potential additional funding. And then we went into a specific ballot question, which you'll see in a moment. We looked at a variety of different things you might spend the money on. And then we also looked at positive and negative arguments, as well as different tax rates. And then, of course, we also looked at a variety of demographic details that we won't really get into tonight, but that are important nonetheless, because we use them to stratify the sample and then weight the sample, and from there look at the various segmentations. If we could move to the methodology slide. Okay. So this shows you a little more detail about the methodology. We did a landline, cell phone, email, and text invitations. So really we can reach people any way that is best for them, as opposed to just forcing them into a box. We looked at likely November 2024 voters within the district and also a March 24 subset. We were in the field in mid-September through almost the end. The average phone survey was 22 minutes long. We completed a total of 400 likely November 2024 voters, and that gives us a margin of error plus or minus 4.87 for the November 24 universe, and plus or minus 6.81 for the March 20 universe. Let's move to the next slide, which is key findings, and then to the subsequent one, which is question 1, favorability rating. And here, this is that first warm-up question that I mentioned that helps us gauge, kind of what's going on in the district, the climate, as we call it. Obviously, it's not the weather. And what we did here is we asked them simply, do you have a favorable or unfavorable impression of the quality of education? It's one of the questions that we asked back in the survey we did for the district in 2016, so we have comparison information. And if you add the very and somewhat favorable together, you can see we're at 50% in round numbers in this particular survey. Favorable versus 15.5, unfavorable, it's a 3.24 to 1 positive to negative ratio. When we look at the 2016 survey, you see was slightly higher at 56.1%, and the ratio 4.75 to 1 because the difference between the favorable and unfavorable. But on the favorable side, really both of them, there's no real statistically significant difference. And I think what you're seeing is a pre and post COVID impact. And in virtually all of the school districts that we've done surveys before and after and even during the pandemic, we've seen this exact same pattern, some of them much more extreme. The pandemic has caused havoc on all kinds of things in our society, and education being one of them. Next slide, titled Q2 Favorable Rating on Public Funds. So for that particular question, again, we have data from the 2016 survey, but in this one, we basically said, do you have a favorable impression of the job the district is doing to manage taxpayer funds? And this always is lower than the previous slide because there's always a larger don't know, as you can see here. It goes up to 37%. That's pretty typical. And we found 47% in round numbers favorable versus 17 unfavorable. And that compares with 2016 at 45%. So actually it's a little better versus 15%, which is a little lower. So better on one side, a little worse on the other side, but virtually the same statistically. This one has been more stable pre and post pandemic, and that's what we're seeing in Jefferson Elementary. Moving to question 3, agreement with the statement. This shows you the data for a question. You agree or disagree that the Jefferson Elementary School District needs additional funding to do its job providing quality education. Again, adding the two sides together strongly and somewhat, you see where the agree is 71% in round numbers versus 12% don't know. In 2016, that was 69% versus 11 in round numbers. So the ratio is not quite as good, but statistically there isn't really any difference. What's interesting is the 71% is one of the highest agree, disagree numbers I've seen on this question in the last 4 months. So I think that's quite encouraging. This isn't a specific ballot question, it's a generic, but it's still better than I've seen in most districts. So let's move on then to question 4, our uninformed support for the ballot question. And what you see on the right-hand side of the slide is the text of the question. So this is a very specific ballot question that meets all the statewide requirements that we have. It can't exceed 75 words, even though we may have more to say. It has to have a tax rate, which you can see here is $95, so that's an increase from your current measure. It has to show how much it raises annually, which is $1.7 million. It has to have a sunset, which you can see here is 9 years. And the rest of the wording is ours to work with as we see fit. And we've included the things that we thought from your previous measure, as well as previous surveys would test well and our experience in other districts. And so it's our best guess before we did the survey what this would be. We then asked, would you definitely vote yes, probably no, definitely no, or don't know. And what you see here, we've broken it down into the March and November election universes. And you see when we add the definitely and probably yeses together, we're at 67% in round numbers for March That's what we do for feasibility. We add the two of those together. And for November, we're at 69.7, so 70% in round numbers. Statistically, the difference between those two election environments is not significant. It's what we would expect to see, though, because the November environment has a larger turnout, which really means more younger voters. And more younger voters means more parents, et cetera. So the bottom line from this first test, and there are going to be a couple more, is this measure's in pretty good shape. I mean, this is starting without any information, and that's certainly a positive place to be. Now, there's still work to do. You don't just put this on the ballot and expect to win, because you have that golden part of the bars that's 31.4 or 33.8, and you need to have an effort to keep those people on board. We could go to the next slide. This one's question 5, features the measure 1. And this is all the things we might spend the money on. And basically what we did is ask these in a random order. When we're done with the interviewing, we then go back and create a scale to rank them that's really accurate. But we also look at, once we've ranked them based on that scaling, we look at the much more likely and somewhat more likely added together, and you see that represented in the ranges with the blue arrow. So at the top of the list of things that voters' priorities are is attract and retain high-quality teachers at 83%, help students read at grade level at virtually the same level, protect core academics in math, science, technology, reading, and writing, kind of a hybrid version of core academics and STEM, then maintain dedicated literacy instruction to help struggling students, expand hands-on science learning, prevent layoffs of teachers and staff, provide additional support for struggling students in all subjects, and rounding out our tier 1, which is really the most important items, upgrade and support computer and instructional technology for student learning. From there, we go into tier 2, and while these things, and we go to the next slide, which is features of the measure number 2, these are all still really highly ranked. They're just not as important to the voters as the ones on the previous slide. So I'll let you look at that at your leisure, but really we should be focusing on the top tier features on the previous slide. If we move on then to Q6, informational statements 1, this is the same sort of analysis, although these are accountability provisions and positive arguments. So in our top tier here, we have all the money raised by this measure will go for our local schools and cannot be taken by Sacramento. And it cannot be taken by Sacramento. That's the magic words, if there is one. And that's 81%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. So really well above the 2/3 threshold. Next, having a great teacher in the classroom is the most important part of providing quality education. Our schools are struggling to recruit the best teachers. This will help. Third is nationally, California places near the bottom of all the 50 states. Then fourth, the school district is losing its best teachers to other nearby districts that can offer higher compensation. And fifth is if the measure fails, the local funding expires, teachers would be laid off, class sizes would increase. And finally, even if you do not have children at school age, the quality of education is a good investment because it improves quality of life and property values. Moving on to the next slide, which is Q6, informational statements 2. These are still all in the top tier. So the good news is there's lots of positives to work with. And you see that on the previous slide, we were at 81 down to 79. Here we're at 77 down to 75. So all in the mid 70s up. There's just a lot to work with here. Again, focusing on the best arguments, even though there's not much difference, is still where we want to be. And the next slide is just the remainder of the positive arguments. This slide is titled Q6 Informational Statement 3. And you see we do slip into tier 2, part of which is at a very low 70, and then we get 60%. And of course, the items that are in the 60s are below that 2/3 threshold. So at this point in the survey, we've introduced the ballot question. We've talked about what we'd spend the money on. We've talked about the positives. And if we can go to Q7, interim support. We introduced the ballot question a second time. And the goal here is to see what happens after we've given them all the information on the positive side of the coin. And you see for the March environment, we go from that 67% to 75, which is certainly what we would expect to see happen. Same thing is true in the November environment, from 70% in round numbers to 79%. Again, a little bit higher in November, but certainly in March or November, it's viable since we only need 2/3 support for the measure in either election. So moving on then to the critical statements. This is, of course, the other side of the coin. This is Q8 critical statements at the top. And the methodology is the same as the informational statements. We don't put a minus sign in front of them to make them seem bad. So the higher they are, the worse they are for us. And so there are certainly some negatives that we need to take into account. And some of these are standard anti-tax arguments. And that's certainly true of the first one, too many high-paid administrators. That's a typical anti-tax argument. The high school district is asking voters for a property tax at the same time. That's actually true, should it be in November. So, going in March might be the way to avoid that. We can't trust the school board. That's another typical anti-tax argument. With residents and businesses still suffering from high inflation, gas and grocery prices, now is not the right time. That's certainly a significant item. This is an increase in the tax we're already paying. That's certainly significant. The average homeowner is already paying $851 in extra taxes to both districts. And don't be fooled, salaries and benefits are the reason for this. Again, that's a pretty standard anti-tax kind of argument. As is the next item, even though it's in tier 2, it's above the 1/3 threshold necessary to defeat a measure. So declining enrollment, well, may seem like a bigger deal, is among these arguments is the least impactful, but still something we need to worry about. Now the next slide gives us, and this was the one titled Q9 Informed Support. This one shows us where we are in a worst case scenario. So we've just beat up on ourselves pretty good by going through all those negatives, and we asked them the exact same ballot question we've been testing again. And you see, well, we started at 67% and we went up to 75 in the March election. We're now at 66, right at or just slightly below the 2/3 threshold. And the same thing is true for November. We started at 70, we went up to 79, and we're back to 68. But again, I think this is the worst case scenario. And while the survey is intentionally structured the way we've gone through it, it's not the real world, right? The real world is some people hear positives first, some people hear negatives, and vice versa, or it gets all mixed up. So another way to look at this is to add the two of these, the second and third together and average them. And so if you do that, instead of at 66%, we're more like 71% in round numbers. So that's certainly above the 2/3 threshold necessary to be successful for March. So March is certainly viable. And the same thing is true for November. If we add the second and third together and then average them, we're somewhere in the 74% range, plus or minus, given the averaging. And again, both of these are viable, but because we just saw the negatives being one of them, the high school districts on the ballot at the same time, they're focusing on November. So being in March, since these numbers support March, seems to make sense to me. I also think, given one of the negatives was inflation and gas prices, given the historic pattern on gas prices, it's likely that they'll be lower in the February-March timeframe than in the October-November timeframe. So that's another argument given that for March, given that both of the two election environments are viable. Now, if we move to the next slide, this is Q10, support for alternative 78 measure. Because we didn't know where we were going to wind up and we were at a higher rate at $95, we have a fallback, which means we basically said instead of $95, what if the rate was 78? So we're looking for a tipping point to see if being at a lower rate helps us get to the level of support we want. And there certainly is some impact. We go from that 66% in the worst case scenario for March up to 72% almost, and from the 68% in November up to 73. So reducing the tax rate a little bit does certainly have an impact. There's a limit to how granular we can be in this kind of question. You can only ask it really 2 times because otherwise people get wise and figure you're playing a bargaining game with them and they tend to say no then. But there certainly is some impact. Probably 88 would be better than 95, but not quite as good as 78. That's sort of a linear analysis. But we're picking numbers that are right underneath psychological ceilings. So that's why I say 88 as a possibility or 78 as is reflected in this question. Or if we go to the next question, this is Q11, this is 68. So again, we're doing the same thing. And you see we do have a bounce here. We're up at 73.5 and 74.5. So there is some tax rate sensitivity, but you don't necessarily need to do that because I think we were at the level we need to be at if you put in the work. As I said at the very beginning here, there's always this golden bar section, which is the people that are probably yes. The purpose of the district explaining what the measure is about in an informational way and an independent non-district run campaign that advocates a yes vote. Those two things need to happen to help keep those probably yeses on board. So it just becomes a question of how risk adverse are you, or how willing to take the risk are you. I think that it's justifiable at $95, but there is some benefit to lowering that. I wouldn't say lower it to 91. That's going to be the same as 95. You got to get under the $90 threshold to get any little bit of increase. But again, I don't think you have to. And then the last question is just a forecast on the economy. And we asked better, about the same, or worse. 21% think the economy is going to be better next year versus 25% worse, and 39% about the same. Compared to other districts we've tested in the last 6 months, your better and your worse are both lower, and the about the same is higher. So on one hand, people are slightly more pessimistic, and on the other hand, they're a little less pessimistic, but they're really into that, oh, things aren't going to change much. And maybe that's good because, among the people that think things aren't going to change much, we're doing okay the way it is. So, I don't think that the economy is necessarily a problem in your district, but I do think that, that can always change. And so going sooner rather than later reduces the economic risk. The longer you go out, the more chance there is for the economy to change, the more chance there is for political events to change. And November is going to be pretty crazy. And that's not referring to the high school district. That's referring to the national issues. So I think March is viable. I think you could do it at 95. I think if you're a little uncomfortable with that, you could go down a little bit lower into the 80s. But you still have to put in the effort. There's lots of elbow grease that needs to be applied to be successful. So that's the presentation that I have for this evening. Certainly happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Are there any questions from fellow trustees?
I have a question, just more for the administration, and that is, what would be the impact if we were to lose funding from parcel tax funding that we have had for the past few years?
The parcel tax we currently have provides $1.2 million annually, and that sunsets in 2026. So that means that we would no longer have that revenue coming in annually, and that means that we would not be able to fund things like, we have beginner teacher supports that this funded. We have 2 additional librarians. We have 3 in the district. This funded 2 additional ones. It funded one of our professional development days. It funds our youth cinema project. It funds, which we just expanded, and it funded some of our after-school programs, which now ELOP is funding. But it also funded additional library books and materials at the school sites. So the schools received some of the funding to select the books for that, as well as STEAM electives at the middle school. Did I miss anything, Mr. Laro?
Yeah, yeah, I'll follow that up. A lot of what the parcel tax does is it supplements our programs, right? So just following up on what Ms. McCulloch had spoke on, they helped with after-school programs, homework centers. They've supplemented our music program to expand from 1 music teacher to now 3 total. She's mentioned the STEAM electives at our middle schools as we begin to build that program out. When you look at a bigger picture with the district and how our funded ADA is actually on a downward trend, so we start to lose our general funding in our LCFF due to the 3-year averaging down. And so as that belt tightens, if we were to lose the parcel tax, all of these, supplemental shiny objects we begin to lose, right? And now that burden is, if we can't afford it, it can go on. But if we start to lose funding, we can't afford it. Like these are, the supplements that we would lose to our programs. So additionally, as we cycle out of the COVID learning loss mitigation funds that are expiring in September 30th, 2024, we do have our teachers, the multi-tiered system of support teachers, as well as our English language development teachers. I think as we spend our learning loss mitigation funding, as in the learning recovery block grant, this would be one of the ways that we could still have that targeted support for our students who are struggling post-pandemic. And this would be another great resource for us to have that continued support for those students. So I think it's very critical that we do not lose this funding because, like I said, it can severely impact our programming.
And there was one more that I forgot to mention. It helped build our ethnic studies program as well. So that was another area that we funded through the parcel tax.
Are there any further questions and or comments?
So if I can just add, so some options for you. So just kind of to know next steps. So tonight was information about the feasibility study. If the board does choose to go for the March election, we would need to have a resolution at the very next meeting on November 8th. So what we need is, I know you need time to discuss. So the discussion could happen at the November 8th meeting with an action. That would entail discussing whether March or November, as well as how much on the parcel tax. So 95, 88, how much you want as per parcel, as well as do we want to keep the language in the measure as it is? Because it does fit what Mr. Lara was saying with our funding MTSS teachers and ELD teachers. But also, if we want to tweak it, that would be another conversation to have as a discussion before we put the resolution forward. So we could discuss it at the November meeting, or we could have a special meeting next week, Wednesday or Thursday. We do have a consultant, a parcel tax consultant that's helping us with kind of ramping up for this. And she is available next Wednesday, Thursday, but she is not available on the 8th of November. So those are your options. If you want to have a broader discussion, have a special meeting, you could do that next Wednesday or Thursday, or you could have the discussion on November 8th.
So I'm going to open up the floor to fellow trustees in terms of having a special meeting. Or are you all okay with having the discussion at the November 8th meeting?
I was gonna say, if we were to do the Wednesday or Thursday, what time would it be at, or would we have to discuss that?
Well, that could be agreed upon. It could be 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock normal time. It's up to you. She's available in the evening on both of those days, as well as me.
I guess the question would be what the benefit of having the special meeting versus doing it on the November 8th meeting. You said this has to be approved at the November 8th meeting?
If you do choose to go for the March 2024, it would have to be approved at the November meeting. So we'd have to have the resolution already drafted. So that means we would have to use probably the same language or tweak it just a little bit, and decide the amount beforehand, because the resolution will have to be ready to go.
The pro that I see is that we would be breaking up our next meeting into smaller chunks instead of having to do it all in one sitting. I'm okay either way. That would be, I think, the only real difference.
Well, it sounds like a major difference would be the presence of the consultant, right? That she would not be available on the 8th, but would be next week.
So we can either talk about the time now, or we can reach out, how would you like to move forward with getting a time for a special meeting and or a November 8th meeting? Did you want us to discuss that now?
If you want to have that special meeting next week, it would be helpful to know which day, and then the time we can post it later. But if you wanted to say the time, 7, 6 o'clock, the person is available. So I just need to confirm which day that the board chooses. It would be helpful if it was selected tonight.
I could do either Wednesday or Thursday as long as it's after, I think you said 6. So yeah, so either day works for me. But I think in light of those details, I think I would prefer a special session. Speaking for myself.
Are there any thoughts from other trustees on the date?
I'm pretty flexible with the recommendations that have been made. I would say it would be nice to put it all on a Wednesday. If that works, that would be my preference, but anything works for me right now as suggested.
I'm leaning more towards November 8th, just because we haven't even talked about if we want to do this and if we want to do it in March or November. So I don't know what the hurry is, but I'm leaning towards if we're going to do it, that we would do it in March and not November.
Just to clarify, if we're going on the March ballot, we have to have the resolution by our November 8th meeting, because there is a deadline to get on the ballot by somewhere in December, and that's before our next regular scheduled meeting. We could do a special meeting later in November, I believe, to do a resolution. Is that correct? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, our council here is, I'd like to bring up Nick Hewer from Stradling, Yuga Carlson, and Ruth. He could speak more on to the deadlines that we have with the county in placing a ballot.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you again this evening. So the deadline for the county to place a partial tax measure on the March ballot is December 6th. You have to deliver the election order resolution to register our voters, and also the superintendent of schools, because notice of the election has to be posted at each school site and then 3 public places. So December 6th is the date that the resolution has to be delivered. You can consider the resolution ordering the election at a special meeting or a regularly scheduled meeting. So it's an option you do consider as well.
And do we only have the November 7th date for November?
We only have a meeting in November, on November 8th, and then we have December 13th. So we could do a special meeting next week to be in time for the November 8th to meet that deadline, or we could have a special meeting later between November 8th and December, I'd have to look at a calendar, before December 6th.
And then that would be an information session, like where we would discuss what we want it to be, and then also an approval at that meeting rather than approval of the 8th.
Yeah, we would just need to have the resolution approved at a meeting before December 6th. So so you can have a discussion on November 8th and decide what you want on the ballot measure and all that, and then have a special meeting to approve the resolution after November 8th, before December 6th. Is that correct? Okay.
President Jordan, if I may, an I statement. I know we talked when we knew we were getting ready to meet with Brian, we knew that we would be competing really for clarity on the initiative with our sister district. And so I think there was some discussion on what may be more favorable. And I believe my understanding during our survey discussions was that March would be in our best interest. And that being said, I would like to recommend that we either do it on the 8th or create a special meeting earlier, because I think many of us are facing schedules with families or possibly traveling during the Thanksgiving holiday, which is the latter part of November. So I would prefer to have it earlier than sooner. In fact, if we can do it on the 8th, as suggested by Trustee Ali, I think we'd have an opportunity to hammer it out, because I know we've touched this a little bit before. And I think Brian for me, did a great job in clarifying how we could be able to move towards a March date, if that's something we'd like. I think that it would benefit us to look at a March date and how we would be able to expedite that before the December 6th deadline.
I have a question, because I am leaning towards the November 8th meeting. However, obviously not having the consultant there. The reason for having the special meeting, is it to solidify the language that's on the resolution? Or can we solidify that? I guess, can we say, yes, what's already written is okay, and then all we're doing at the November 8th meeting is really just discussing the
amount.
cost of the parcel? Like, what does it require?
We need to know ahead of time, because our legal needs to write the resolution. So the resolution we'd have to know now.
Include the,
So that's what you would discuss next week. Or if you have direction today, if you want to go for $95 as well as go for March, and the language is fine, then we can move forward with November 8th. And you can then discuss and decide if you want to do that or not.
That sounds like a good idea to me. Hearing that if we went from 95 to 91, that there wouldn't probably be much of a difference. I think we should just go for 95 in March and do the meeting on November 8th. I move that we do that.
I don't think, is it an action item?
no, it is not
It's
an
not
action
an action
item.
item. So you're
but
just
we can
providing
discuss
direction
it.
to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah,
I-
so I
I-
mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna agree with Trustee Ali.
Yeah, so again, I think we're all, and I haven't heard from Trustee Rashba on the March timeframe. I agree with the March timeframe. Unfortunately, next week doesn't work for me at all. If we do need to move forward with the meeting, we will have 4 that seem like they can make it. I just will not be able to make it for a meeting next week.
Well, I was going to say that I thought that doing a special meeting next week was a good idea to hear from the consultant, just to get that full perspective. I just feel like there are some important decisions here. I'd like to have all the information out there. I certainly have ideas based on the presentation tonight and, what I've read and thought about. But it seems like if we could hear the viewpoint of the consultant, then that would be valuable.
We can always have the consultant come at other meetings to talk, but it would be, we have to be careful once the resolution is passed about how we do discuss it in the public meeting. But we could also set up times that you can have a conversation with the consultant as well if you need to.
So we need to make a decision. Do we want to have a special meeting next week on Wednesday or Thursday with hopefully 4 other board members? Or are we saying that we're making a decision today to move forward with March, $91, and
95.
sorry, $95.
And provide direction. You're not
and-
making a decision.
and
Just
the,
provide
yes,
direction.
providing direction so that on the November 8th meeting, we can have additional discussions and then approve the resolution. So the options are meeting next week, our only meeting on the November 8th meeting, and discussion and action.
And there is another option, like if you're not ready on November 8th, if you feel you're not ready at all, we could schedule a special meeting after that time too. So it's not like the end all be all. We could put the resolution on November 8th, and then if the board does not feel ready to make a decision, we could schedule a special meeting and do that as well. So that is a backup if needed,
And would the consultant be there for that post November 8th meeting if we were to
if
have
they're
it?
available, yes. The consultant said that they are attending another board meeting, so they possibly could join us on Zoom, but I have a feeling it would be around the same time. But it's possible, maybe.
I was just wondering, what are some of the questions that you have for the consultant? Because you said there were still some other questions, or I can't remember exactly what you said, but yeah.
I don't know very much about the consultant, but did she work with us previously?
Yes, she did. She's actually also worked with Brian Godby, so he might be able to answer some of your questions that you have as well. But she helped us successfully pass in 2016, thank you, the previous parcel tax.
So, more not really specific questions is what I have, but more I would like to hear about her experience. What was working in our district like? What was the campaign like? How much energy was needed to rally around our base? I think that the measure passed pretty resoundingly, but what did it require to get to that point?
I'm trying to remember because I was in the district at the time. Do you remember, Mr. Valenti, as well?
I do.
Don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you remember? You want to share?
He hit the button first.
A lot of work. I mean, we had to get the support of anyone who was believed in what we were trying to do. So we had to recruit people to be on the committee, to get out there and phone bank, everything that you would do for an election campaign. It's the same kind of work and energy is necessary, and we need everyone's help.
What I did learn from the consultant, though, is 10 years ago, phone banking worked. Doesn't work anymore. People don't answer their phones, which is good because then we don't have to phone bank. But it does mean, so there are other ways, texting, email, campaigns. So it makes it a little bit easier for campaigning. So I remember doing the phone banking as well, but fortunately that's not how people receive information, so we don't have to do that anymore.
And just one other question comes to mind. That parcel tax was in the November 2016 presidential election. Was it difficult to get people to pay attention to our local parcel tax with all that was going on?
The results show that it was resounding yes. So I don't think it was difficult it was a lot of support, especially in our area, I believe.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the reasons why we did it at that time, because we knew more people would be paying attention to the ballot.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably, I mean, I know that we're saying March, and so I guess the question would be, being that less voters would vote in March than in the presidential election. I know we've said that it would be favorable either way. And obviously it's a guesstimation. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? What would be the risk of truly doing it in March outside of the volume of voters that are going to vote during that time frame?
Yeah, I mean, historically, the community has really gathered around Jefferson Elementary School District. We passed Measure J last year in 2022 with not a lot of outreach, and it passed pretty well. The community supports the initiatives that the board undertakes, and I think for us it's critical that we maintain at bare minimum this funding. Obviously, when that dollar amount goes up, as Mr. Godby had shown, the likelihood goes down slightly. But I think if we go out in March and at a higher number and we don't get it, at least we still have November to go out and try again. So, I'd like to reiterate, it's critical that no matter what happens, that we at bare minimum maintain and renew the parcel tax. But at least we at this point we have two shots at passing it.
What would be the cost if we did it twice?
The cost of a ballot measure, do we know what the cost is? Do you know?
I don't know what the precise cost would be. You might be able to get it estimate from the county, but all districts and municipalities are on the ballot share in the election cost of the registrar. So the percentage of the
Okay.
cost.
Perfect. So with that, Trustee Rashba, do you still feel as though you would like to have that special meeting? Or do you feel like you're okay with the responses that were given and we should move forward with the November 8th meeting?
I personally would prefer to have that special meeting, but I am comfortable moving ahead if the other board members do not feel that we need to have it.
I just want to say, Trustee Rashba, that I fully support you wanting to get the full picture. I think it makes you a stronger board trustee. And I encourage you to be firm on your position because you have supportive colleagues to your left and right. So if you think that that's going to be a learning moment, I think it might be something that if we are seasoned, it'd be a good refresher for us too. But I think it's an opportunity. If you think that it would enhance your understanding, that, I want you to know that I support that because I think it's really important that you get a full perspective, never experiencing this from this seat before.
So we have two for moving forward with the special meeting. I know, obviously, Trustee Sujisaka, you said that you were available next week as well. So it seems as though and I guess Trustee Ali, are you available Wednesday or Thursday of next week? So I guess can we give a recommendation then on whether Wednesday or Thursday is best for the consensus? Obviously, I can't, so I'm actually just reliant on you all. We would need a quorum to move forward.
Right, we need at least 3. So we have,
I prefer Wednesday. I think that was, yeah. Wednesday.
is
would
Wednesday
recommend
preferred by
Wednesday?
all? Does that work for everybody else? Okay, so I will confirm 6 or 7 o'clock. What would be preferred? 6 o'clock would be preferred for me. Is that okay with everyone else? Okay, so I will confirm with the consultant and we'll schedule a special meeting next Wednesday, November 1st at 6 p.m. to have a discussion and learn more about the process for a parcel tax. And then that way we can give guidance to develop a resolution for the November 8th meeting, which would be a very quick turnaround for the resolution, but I think we can do it. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Godby, we're going to thank you for your time and
Thank you.
release you for the evening. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, we'll be moving on to item 7C, Board Resolution number 231025. The administration recommends the board adopt Resolution 231025A, authorizing signatories for Jefferson Elementary School District to submit CFA applications for the California State Preschool Program, CSPP. Are there any comments or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. Ms. Kovare, can I please get roll call?
Ms. Leah Inga Anawai,
Aye.
Mr. Rashba,
Aye.
Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Sujisaka,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye. That was unanimous. Moving on to item 7E, the administration recommends acceptance of a contract in the amount of $90,000 with KC Champions LLC to provide comprehensive expanded learning morning programs at JF Kennedy and Woodrow Wilson schools for the 2023-24 school year. The contract will be funded by the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program grant, ELOP. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion. Yes.
So I know we have champions at other school sites. Is this a reapproval or
No,
a
this is
renewal?
for morning care. So it's called the drop zone so that we have more support for students and families that need it in the morning.
Okay, and then last question, why is there cents in this number? I thought it was 90 million at first and no other thousands of dollars have cents in it.
That's just the contract, so that's what we have.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just like, all the other ones have thousands, but otherwise, I'm good on questions and I move to approve.
Any other comments? If not, I will entertain a second.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Moving on to item 7F, the California Assessment of Student Program Performance and Progress, the CASP results. This is an information item. Ms. Scott, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Service, will share the results for the 2022-23 year.
And I am joined with Ms. Dina Conti as well.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent McCulloch, and the JESD community. Tonight, we're here to share the CASP results for the 2022-23 school year. This evening, we will give you an overview of our data and provide some insights about our findings, as well as discuss action steps for this year.
So before we begin to examine our data, I'd like to take a moment to review the identified priorities from the 22-23 school year. So last year, we dove deeper into universal design for learning, making it a strong focus of our monthly staff meetings, district professional development days, and bi-weekly administrative council meetings. Last year, our newly formed district collaborative teacher teams met 4 times throughout the year to share best practices. And finally, last year, an additional 10 teachers were hired to support elementary targeted instructional grouping and middle school designated English language development periods. School leaders also provided specific professional learning on English learner engagement strategies through the Elevation platform. So now let's look at our CASP results from 22-23. When looking at all students in grades 3 through 8, 45.2% of our students met or exceeded grade level standards in English language arts, and 33.5% of our students met or exceeded grade level standards in math. We acknowledge that our district has lifted large initiatives over the past several years, and these undoubtedly will take time to develop roots before our efforts become visible. Often in education, we pivot too early, not giving core initiatives the time needed to have an impact. We are committed to staying the course as our priorities are evidence-based and aligned to the California MTSS framework. During our initial overview of the CASP data, 2 questions came to mind. 1, how do we compare to the state overall scores? And 2, how do we compare to other districts in San Mateo County? Comparing our data to the state average, JESD is slightly below in both English language arts and math. When comparing our results to those districts in our county, we looked at comparisons between last year and pre-pandemic scores, and a comparison between the 22-23 school year and the 21-22 school year. When reviewing the results from our neighboring school districts, we can conclude that JESD is achieving similar results as most other San Mateo County school districts.
Another wondering that came to mind was how we performed over time. Here you see historical data going back to the 2015-2016 school year. The data shows that we haven't returned to our pre-pandemic levels, and we don't see significant gains since returning. Our data shows that we have incremental gains and losses, but overall, we continue to flatline in both areas. We also disaggregated our data to see how different subgroups are achieving. This slideshow shows our subgroups based on ethnicity and race. As you can see, there are inequities in achievement levels. Our Asian students are outperforming every other subgroup. We looked at socioeconomic status. Students who are identified as not socioeconomically disadvantaged are outperforming students who are. In 22-23, 54% of our 3rd through 8th graders who tested qualified as being socioeconomically disadvantaged. Students with disabilities on this slide refer only to students who took the CASP, not the California Alternative Assessment. When looking at our students who are not disabled as compared to students with disabilities, we see a huge discrepancy in achievement levels. This year, our special education department is reviewing the adopted curriculum, providing additional training for staff, and working with site leaders to ensure alignment of best practices. When looking at our students who are not classified as English language learners, compared to our English learners, we see a large gap in achievement levels. It's important to remember that our ELL students are learning English as well as content standards. There is sometimes a lag between CASP results and LPAC results. We will present on LPAC data soon. However, in summary, we increased the percentage of reclassified students from 11% to 14%. Last year, we hired an additional 10 English learner teachers to support our second language students, and we will continue to gather data and evaluate the impact of the support system. When we look at ELA and by grade level, we can see about 50% of our 3rd graders are meeting or exceeding grade level by the end of the year. As we go through the grades from 4th to 5th to 6th, our students lose some ground. By 7th grade, we're able to recover a tiny bit, and then we see another small dip in 8th grade. Here's our grade level data for math. Just like in ELA, 50% of our 3rd graders meet or exceed grade level. And as you can see, as we go up in grade level, our percentage of students meeting or exceeding grade level decreases significantly.
So while our overall CASP data isn't yet reflective of our efforts, we have identified many bright spots of growth within our schools and amongst cohorts of students. To get a full overview of each of our schools' performance, you can access the data on the CASP website listed on the slides. So congratulations to these schools who demonstrated strong overall growth in English language arts: Woodrow Wilson, MP Brown, Garden Village, and SBA. When tracking student cohort groups, we look at the same group of students over time. A year's worth of growth would equate to a 0% change in scores within the cohort group from one year to the next. Therefore, these identified bright spots who achieved gains between 6% and 18% must be commended. The cohort group of students who had the most substantial growth in English language arts across our entire district last year were the 5th graders at Garden Village. Congratulations to these schools who demonstrated strong overall growth in math: Woodrow Wilson, MP Brown, Garden Village, TRP, and Westlake. Again, when tracking cohort groups, we look at the same group of students over time. These identified bright spots gained between 5% and 13%, which is to be commended. The cohort group of students who had the most substantial growth in math across our entire district last year were the fourth graders at MP Brown. After interviewing our site leaders about their school-wide and cohort student successes, we have collectively identified some common trends. I would like to invite Principal Alex DeLonda up to share out our findings.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm not up here to accept like all the credit for this. I want to first of all give credit where it's due. It's our hardworking teachers who are on a daily basis. It's their hard work and their determination to improve student learning with all of our students. But some common trends that we've seen together from our schools that have made progress. We've working with adopted curriculum. We have high leverage instructional practices, using data protocols to have data informed discussions and action plans. Increased teacher collaboration with teachers and amongst grade levels and departments to work with these data protocols and action plans. There's also a focus on early literacy and foundational skill building in language arts, and engaging with progress monitoring. Also, tracking students and their progress and building on the skill sets. We also have targeted after-school programs that support students at their levels, all our diverse level learners in our after-school programs. We have very targeted, structured programs for them, and also supporting our families with help with whatever needs that be for students, whether that's academic, creatively, or socio-emotionally. So these are some trends that we found as a group, and yeah, thank you.
So our data shows us that substantial growth for our students is not insurmountable given the right conditions and focus.
So learning new information is a complex process. It is not linear and varies from person to person. As stated in the UDL framework, variability is the norm. Over the past decade or two, Professor John Hattie of the University of Melbourne, Australia, has conducted a meta-analysis of instructional practices. His extensive research is the world's largest evidence base on what works best in schools to improve learning. We use his evidence as a guide when determining how to best focus our efforts to improve student outcomes. So John Hattie has used the barometer to visualize the effect size of an influence on student achievement. The barometer scale is divided by the hinge point D equals 0.4, which represents, according to Hattie, the mean of all effect sizes in the underlying meta studies. Hattie's barometer of influence goes from red, negative effects, to yellow, developmental effects, to green, teacher effects, and finally over the hinge point 0.4 to the blue zone, which are desired effects. We have included in your packet tonight a full printout of the complete list for your reference.
Tonight, we've invited some staff to share how we are working to collectively improve learning outcomes for every student. That means that at every level, at the district office, school sites, and in classrooms, every educational partner is collectively working towards the same goal. We've invited some guests to share about work happening at every level. As we highlight our next steps, we have also included an effect size from John Hattie's work that correlates with the actions. So here to talk about some action steps at the district level, I'd like to welcome Principal Beth Goff, who is going to talk about MTSS.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. One of our main focuses this year is to build a system or systems of support, that's the SS part of MTSS, that wraps around the entire school by using data-driven, collaborative problem solving to address academic and non-academic needs. Our work is focusing on core instruction, Tier 1, and differentiation within the classroom to support our learners. We are focusing on protocols and processes to inform our decisions within schools and classrooms, monitoring the progress of our instruction. We know that a healthy core is achieved when 80% of our students are meeting at or above grade level. We're not there yet, but we are on our way.
Here to talk about new teacher support, we have Principal on Special Assignment, Jen LaRocque.
Good evening. Becoming a highly qualified teacher takes many years to develop. So by providing additional training to our new staff, such as classroom management, lesson design, data analysis, and parent involvement, teachers will more quickly develop the skills to help more students become expert learners.
Here to talk about professional learning, we have Jessica Pace, Program Director of Teaching and Learning.
Good evening. When staff have deeper knowledge of curriculum resources, they are able to plan lessons that eliminate barriers to student learning. When we remove barriers, students have access to grade level content and instruction, which in turn increases student engagement and elevates student learning. This year, we have offered professional development sessions on the new elementary Twig Science program, on the science of reading, and the Common Core foundational skills through CRLP, the California Reading and Literature Project. In addition, we've offered sessions for new teachers on our core curriculum and intervention programs.
Here to talk about middle school math release days is Vice Principal from Fernando, Brian Bethel.
Good evening. Our middle school math teams are provided monthly release days. These are days out of the classroom to collaboratively design new student engagement routines that are aligned to our math curriculum. During these days, teachers review assessment data, plan upcoming lessons, align pacing of the curriculum. We've also incorporated learning from a recent training at the San Mateo County of Education from the author of the book, Building Thinking Classrooms in Math. It's exciting to observe our students now up and working in small groups to solve problems that have multiple pathways to a solution.
Moving on to action steps at the school level, we have Principal Ben Turner here to talk about staff meetings that focus on professional learning.
Hello, everyone. All site instructional leaders have 2 one-hour staff meetings per month in which to bring cohesion to district initiatives by providing specific site professional learning which are based on the needs of our staff. This might look like co-planning UDL lessons, modeling engagement strategies, reviewing curriculum materials, and providing space for teacher inquiry.
Here to talk about data analysis is Principal Roxanne Hannon.
Each school site has a leadership team who meet at least monthly to discuss the core of our health instruction. 3 times a year, school leaders and staff engage in a data cycle to make informed decisions about how to best strengthen our core instruction. In addition, the team reviews intervention programs, analyzes the effectiveness of each, and then makes recommendations about next steps. This data is also shared with families through multiple platforms such as PTA meetings, school site council, ELAC meetings, and parent cafes. We continually use these platforms to empower our families with information on how to best support their child's education.
Here to share about classroom visits and feedback loops is Principal Nuala O'Sullivan Haley.
Good evening, everyone. Principals have committed to visiting 3 classrooms a day and having reflective conversations about instruction. This practice helps site leaders build trust with their staff and determine trends, needs, and a focus for staff professional learning. Thank you.
And here to talk about co-teaching is teacher Jill Gunther from JFK.
I'm one of 10 newly hired MTSS specialists supporting our elementary math program. Before the start of the school year, we had received training in our math curriculum intervention program and have since used the training to improve outcomes in math through a co-teaching model. We use data to determine which grade levels at our specific sites needed more immediate intervention, and we continue to collect the data as we progress through the year and use it to respond to student needs.
And finally, to highlight work happening at the classroom level, we have a short video from Zoe Marinkovic, who leads the 5th grade district collaborative team. Each grade level team is focused on implementing UDL, English learner strategies, and planning for differentiated instruction.
Good evening. My name is Zoe Marinkovic, and I'm a 5th grade teacher at North Washington Elementary School. I am also this year's teacher lead for the 5th grade collaborative team. So far this year, we've had 3 meetings. We met on Institute Day and dug into the UDL goal that the district has set for us around student engagement. In September, we dug a little deeper and focused on identifying our flows and our growth for the year when it comes to engagement. For us, we picked 2 specific skills to work on. That's recruiting student interest, and that involves optimizing choice, making sure that our students have choice so that they can work independently and that they see skills that are just the right level and content that is relevant for them. The second one we chose was sustaining effort. So we're thinking about how do we help our students set goals? How do we give timely, but most importantly, actionable feedback? And how do we provide space for students to collaborate with each other? In October, we took our understanding of those UDL goals and we dove into Unit 2 of our math curriculum. We focused on Module 2 and Module 3 and spent a lot of time sharing best practices as well as materials that we had created to help students do those things like reflect and work on skills independently. And we're going to take that work that we did in our October meeting and expand on it in November. Next month, we're hoping to plan farther ahead and all work together on one of our modules so that we can use each other's skills to help make the best scaffolds that we possibly can and share that work amongst all the school sites so that our students can have the very best that they deserve. Thanks so much.
Our presentation tonight has been all about academic progress in ELA and math. On December 15th, the state will be releasing the state dashboard. Academic progress is one indicator on the dashboard, but it isn't our district's or any school's entire story. We encourage you to look at the dashboard when it's released on the 15th. As Pam stated earlier, we've worked hard over the last few years to build and support our district priorities around UDL, collaborative teams, and supporting our English learners. This work requires every educational partner to engage and move the work forward. We share the responsibility of student learning outcomes and know that our focus and progress with implementation will help us move forward. Growth isn't always linear, and change takes time, so we're committed to staying the path.
That concludes our presentation this evening. We want to thank you for submitting your questions to us in advance. It was very helpful. Are there any remaining points of clarification?
Opening up for questions. Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you on your presentation. I had 5 questions and now I only have 1. So I want to, first of all, just say great job on answering all the questions I had, because this is a new one actually. So we mentioned, I think I mentioned before how in my question, and you actually answered it here, middle school data, and how there weren't really many highlights of middle school data. So what specific supports are going to be going specifically to middle schools? Since I think they have the biggest gaps of achievement.
So as Brian mentioned earlier, we have a strong focus with our middle school math teams, providing monthly release time, both for our 6th grade math science and for our 7th to 8th grade math team. We've had a lot of fun working with them. We've provided release time as well for our elective team. Our new STEAM teachers have been able to come together and plan. As well as our 6th grade humanities team. They have also had release time. So really the power, as you saw in John Hattie's research, is around collective teacher efficacy. That's going to have the biggest gain in student achievement. So bringing teachers together, allowing them the time and space to share best practices, plan, look at assessments, really trying to support those teams in doing that work. Anything else?
And you did answer that earlier, so thank you for reiterating.
And as Jessica had mentioned earlier, was it yesterday that you had the PD? Monday, it felt like yesterday. Right, so she as well, working with Miss LaRock, they've done amazing work pulling in our new teachers, providing them additional support around our adopted textbooks, curriculum, instructional strategies as well. Anything I'm missing?
Any further questions?
Yes. I want to echo what Trustee Sujisaka said about the thoroughness of the presentation. And I had 3 questions and you reduced it down to 2. So that was pretty good. So the first question is, I saw on one of the slides, it said high leverage instructional practices. Can you just explain what that is, or maybe give us an example? I guess co-teaching would be one, but.
Yes, so providing students with choice around how they access material and how they show their learning, small group instruction, sentence frames, vocabulary development, providing rich feedback through progress towards goals, connections between the learning objectives and then real world content, anchor charts, teacher created videos, coaching, and one-on-one support. That was what we gathered from our bright spots. And I think we forgot to mention, we did provide you all with a list of key terms, and many of these I know are education terms. So if you want to refer back, they're in that list.
Okay, thank you. And then also, how was this visible learning study introduced to the teachers?
It is not something that we have focused on district-wide. It's really a tool that we use to determine, where are those high leverage practices that we want to focus on. So it's been a study that's been around for, I don't know, probably since the early 2000s. And he just actually released a more updated version. So we have talked with around the collective teacher efficacy, that one specific piece, because it has the biggest impact. That really was the foundation for creating the district collaborative teams. And we did share that information with our leads last year as the reason why we're using that structure to help improve learning.
The reason why I asked is because
I was just going to add that during the pandemic, when we were all online, that our teaching staff did receive training from Corwin, who is the publisher. And at that time, it was the distance learning playbook. But all of that information was based on Hattie, Fisher, and Fry and their research around visible learning. So I would say that the teaching staff has been exposed to these concepts. And then we tied in UDL. And so now we're just circling back and revisiting all of those concepts.
Okay. So the reason why I asked is because, as you all know, I'm a teacher as well. So when I glanced at this, I got excited. I said, wow, this is great. And I automatically started thinking about how I would implement this or how we could implement it. So that was actually my third question, is how are you implementing it, which you already, you presented that, but I think there's an opportunity to slow down and use, metacognition and go deeper into it with the teachers and be explicit about giving them an opportunity to tell you what they're going to do, so I don't know. It's just, I really was impressed when I looked at this chart, and I do see the alignment with the implementation. So thank you.
Any further questions?
I wanted to echo my fellow trustees' comments about the thoroughness and excellence of the presentation. Really helpful, really great to see all the steps that our district is taking. I have just one question, and that is that we have kind of one main area that we look at to see how we're doing, the state assessment results that don't even come out in the current school year, where we have to wait, until after the school year. So what are some things that you're thinking about and looking at in the interim to know, is this really working? Are we making sufficient progress?
So we are implementing 3 universal screens this year. So quick assessments of benchmarks. So we have a fall, a winter, a spring. So we will be administering those, and we are having data meetings at school sites to look at how's the health of our core, our tier 1 instruction. We also have some teacher teams who are utilizing the CASP interim assessments. So we are supporting them to use that, and that data is helpful because it exactly matches and replicates the test. It gives students access to the language. It gets students access to the tools that they experience, to testing format, to testing on a computer. So we do have measures in place. We also have some curriculum-based measures, so benchmark assessments for ELA. So we are collecting data as we go, and part of our work and our focus is working with the leadership, so principals and our MTSS specialists, to really work to analyze that data and come up with action steps, and then monitoring those action steps to see whether or not our action step is working.
Any further questions?
No questions, but I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I love the representation from throughout the district. I think for me, it's given me a nice flavor and refreshing spirit of what's happening. I felt the energy, I will say, because a lot of times we don't get to see all of our teams from different schools unless it's your school that's presenting. So I appreciated that, getting a personal touch to tonight's very thorough presentation. So excellent job. 2 questions of mine were answered, one from Shaquille, Trustee Ali, and then also from some of the insight you provided. And I appreciate being able to go back and debrief and digest a lot of the information with being a visual learner. I appreciate the key terms. It's very helpful. I think we've asked about it before in the past. I recall when President Jordan came on, she had mentioned about creating some form of a Bible of all the acronyms that we have here. And so this was great to see. I felt like some of that has come to fruition. So thank you.
I also echo my fellow board trustees' sentiments. I know, Ms. Scott, we've had many conversations about these scores. And so I'm very grateful for the consistency and the thoroughness and the details. And I also am so happy to see the engagement from our administrators and our teachers. I think that just really helps solidify that everyone is bought in and we're all working towards the same goal and the same mission. I do have one question, more of just maybe giving some more details on the targeted after school programs.
I think who was it? Nula, would you like to share about your math after school program?
Yes.
You want to come up to the microphone?
So this past school year, we had several of our teachers who took on targeted after-school intervention programs in ELA and math. So for the first part of the year, we focused on ELA, and then for the latter part of the year, it was for math, and it was mostly 4th and 5th grade. And I'm thinking maybe that's why we saw our scores go up in those areas.
Sorry if you could stay
Yes.
up there, Mr. Well. And when you say the after school program, is that a part of the after school program at your school? Is it just at your school? Is it at other schools? Like, what does that look like specifically?
Well, I can't speak for what happens at other schools, but there is money budgeted in every site for after school intervention, where teachers have the opportunity to take a small handful of students and be paid a stipend.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, if there are no further questions, obviously this was just a presentation of the results. But thank you again so much for spending your evening here with us and answering all of our questions, and obviously the thoroughness of that presentation.
And we want to give a big shout out to all of our presenters as well. Thank you all for being here. We've worked hard.
Perfect. And feel free to stay with us for the rest of this agenda. We'll be moving on to item 8B. This is a resolution number 231025 for the Board of Education of the Jefferson Elementary School District, authorizing the issuance of the Elementary School District election of 2022 general obligation bonds, Series B, and action related thereto. This is an information and action item. The administration recommends approval of the resolution for the election of 2022 general obligation bonds, Series B, and action related thereto. Are there any, sorry, this is information. Yes.
We also have a presentation.
Perfect.
I have Chris Hyatt from Kegit Advisors to give a little background on our Series B issuance of Measure J.
Only 2 minutes. 1 minute now. No problem.
You also have the presentations. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Well, thank you for having me back tonight. I'm happy to be back in front of the board. We're here tonight to talk about the next issuance of bonds from Measure J. So starting on page 1, just a little background on Measure J. It was approved back in June of 2022 for $45 million in general obligation bonds with an estimated tax rate of $15.70 per 100,000 of assessed valuation. To date, we have sold one series of bonds from Measure J, Series A, which was sold in November of 2022 for $22.5 million. So that leaves you another $22.5 million left to be sold under Measure J. And that first series had an all-inclusive rate of 4.73%. Whenever we talk about bonds, we always have to give an update on your assessed valuation because your tax base is what repays the bonds. So on slide 2, we have a history of your assessed valuation. This represents the value of all taxable properties within your district boundaries. This history goes back to 1989. And just this most recent year, a couple months ago, we got the latest figure from the county showing 5.19% assessed valuation growth. So your tax base continues to grow at a very strong rate. On the bottom left-hand corner, we have some annualized growth rates showing just the history. Your longest history there, 35-year annualized growth rate, 5.59%. So very, very strong growth for the district. When we talk about the next issuance, we have to make an assumption of where your tax base will be in future years. We're assuming a rate of 3.5% on the long end. So very conservative to those numbers shown on slide 2. On slide 3, we have a snapshot of interest rates. As many of you know, during the pandemic, we hit all-time lows on interest rates. But in the last year or so, interest rates have risen pretty dramatically. The chart on the left-hand side shows general obligation bond rates going back about 60 years. And you can see from a historical perspective, rates are still pretty low. Unfortunately, they're not quite as low as they were a couple years ago. And just in the last few months, rates have risen yet again. So you can see the increase from about May until here we are in October. But thankfully, when Measure J was planned, we planned it with pretty conservative interest rates of 6% per issuance, and we are still below that level. So on slide 4, tonight we're here to talk about the next series of bonds, Series B, which we're planning for $10 million to be sold in November of 2023. Because interest rates have stayed below that 6% level and because your tax base has grown by more than the 3.5% that we had originally planned Measure J for, right now we're not estimating to need to use the full $15.70. So right now we're targeting a tax rate of $14.80, so just a little bit lower there. And for the Series B issuance, as of 2 weeks ago, we were estimating an interest rate of 4.7%. I think it's slightly higher than that as of today because rates have risen. But still well below that 6% that we had originally projected. With that, that leaves $12.5 million left to be sold as Series C sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. And then the chart on the right shows how we layer the bond issuances together. So Series A has already been sold with the orange bars. The green bars represent this upcoming Series B issuance, and you'll see how we drop the tax rate to leave space for the final issuance, Series C, approximately 2 years from now. As part of the bond issuance process, we always have to get an updated credit rating from one of the major credit rating agencies. So we actually went up to San Francisco and met with Moody's in person a few weeks ago at Nick's office. Thank you, Nick, for hosting that. So on October 10th, the district received an updated credit rating, AA1, with a stable outlook, which was the same rating that you had on the last issuance. So you maintained your very strong credit rating. That's about 2 notches higher than the average school district in California. And that speaks to the creditworthiness of your bonds. And Moody's cited the following listed there as the rationale: very strong financial position, conservative budget practices from your district as a whole and your management, very strong income and wealth levels here in your district area, and then a growing tax base, as we already discussed. So very strong credit rating there. That strong credit rating will also help you achieve a low interest rate when the bonds are eventually sold. So in terms of next steps, before you tonight are legal documents to approve the next issuance of bonds for $10 million. If those are approved, we would plan to finalize the POS, which stands for the Preliminary Official Statement. That is the big document included in your board packet that investors receive to decide if they want to purchase your bonds. From there, the bonds would be priced and sold on November 7th. We'd lock in the interest rates at that point, and the closing would occur November 29th. That's when you would receive the funds from the bond issuance. Are there any questions on this?
I have a question. I wanted to know about the timing. If the Series A, B, and C is kind of set out in the initial measure that we passed, and when the bonds are sold.
Yeah, there's no set timeline on the amounts that we issue or when we issue them. It's more based upon the projects that we have slated, right? When we had issued $22.5 million, actually at the same time last year, we had a list of projects that we were going to do. You've seen a lot of construction going on amongst the district. Some of these projects were originally budgeted out at a certain amount but came over budget. So in order to continue and finish these projects out, we are going for Series B to finish these projects. As in the cost of concrete, like more than tripled. And these are very concrete heavy projects. In terms of Series C, we don't have a set timeline on when we'd like to move forward with selling the last $12.5 million worth of bonds. We are considering, there are sites that in the last couple of measures, Measure I and Measure U, and Measure J, that haven't gotten bond dollars spent on those school sites. So what we're looking to do is we have some projects in mind, like student drop-offs, and also attending to other green spaces within our school sites and the mixed use of them in partnership with the City of Daly City. But we're still exploring what does that look like and the financing and costing of those projects. As you know, every day that goes by, things get more and more expensive. So we are trying to, within the next 2 to 3 years, come up with a more just a thorough, thought out plan and decision on how we're going to spend those funds. But there's not, like I said, a set time to when. It's just we have projects that are ongoing and we need funding to complete them.
I had a question based on that question. So if there's no timeline, is there a time limit?
Yeah, there is a time limit. So whenever we make an issuance, we have to spend the money within 3 years. One of the things that that Mr. here does, and when we're selling these bonds, is we have a drawdown schedule of, okay, if we're issuing X amount of dollars at this time frame, what are the projects that you guys have planned, and when are we going to spend it? I could say that we've beat the 3-year projected expenditure for Series A, which is why we're going for Series B. We're very aggressive under the leadership of Ms. McCulloch in trying to create welcoming spaces, secure spaces, and spaces that are conducive to learning for our students. So with that, there's been a need to continue to improve upon our capital facilities.
Any further questions? If not, this is an action item. So I will read this resolution again unless there's any further questions. So the administration recommends approval of resolution number 231025, a resolution of the Board of Education of the Jefferson Elementary School District authorizing the issuance of Jefferson Elementary School District, San Mateo County, California, election of 2022 general obligation bonds, Series B, and action related thereto.
I move that we approve the issuance of bond Series B as stated.
I second the resolution no, just kidding. I second.
There's a first and a second. Ms. Kovare, can I get roll call, please?
Ms. Leah Inga Anawai.
Aye.
Mr. Rashba.
Aye.
Mr. Ali.
Aye.
Mr. Sujisaka.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye. That was unanimous. We will now be moving on to item 11, governance team member comments, reports, and board meeting reflection. And I will start on my right.
I think we had a great meeting, a lot of shared wisdom, a lot of movement and celebration, and I'm excited for Saturday. I think we have our Bayshore block party. I've missed it in the past years. It's been hit and miss, but I'm excited to be able to be in community. Someone Solutions is an organization that has been serving our North San Mateo County Pacific Islander students for the past 15 years. And after the Bayshore Block Party, they will be having their 15th anniversary party and celebration, and they have been at the forefront of really pushing the CTE movement throughout the county, and I just want to commend them. At the end of this month, during Thanksgiving weekend, Jaya Sailua will be visiting from American Samoa, from the territory of American Samoa, and she will be hosted here in Daly City. She is the first openly transgender that has been celebrated throughout the country, actually globally, as a FIFA soccer player, and we're excited to have her come and her movie being shown here. We couldn't get it in the Daly City theater, but it'll be shown in San Bruno. She will also be making an appearance open to the public Saturday morning, and hopefully we're waiting on the green light to have it here in a location in Daly City. But I think that her presence, not just in the sport, but as we speak to inclusion and just her courage and her story is really important. We didn't realize that once we put out seats that we were going to be sold out within a few hours. So we're hoping that Cinemark will open up a theater for the students to participate, because we did just get a sponsor who is willing to honor some seats for certain students, and we want to make sure that when that happens, we can offer some of those seats to our students and our families here in our school district. So I will keep our superintendent abreast of those details, but I think it's exciting to be able to welcome some of these to me, aligned with our ethnic studies, CTE, come to our district and our community. But just thank you again for a wonderful meeting.
Excellent meeting. I just want to say, I always enjoy so much hearing the voices and perspectives of our students often at the beginning of our meeting. But tonight, I appreciated hearing the voices and perspectives of our school leaders, principals, teachers, and others who are leading the way in our district. Your comments and insights were very much appreciated. So love hearing that perspective as well.
I think we did a good job of listening actively, communicating openly and respectfully. And I also appreciated the creativity and collaboration of our administrators tonight. Thank you, Ms. Scott, for orchestrating that, and all of you for coordinating together. And that's it. Thanks.
I'd like to echo everyone else's statements, and specifically about the presentation for the Ed Services Department. It's always, I'm sure, nerve-wracking. I think you have one of the toughest jobs on this board. It's like you have a table full of educators right here that are ready to pounce on you at any second, and you handle that very well. So, and again, yeah, exactly. And exactly. And so I wanted to actually highlight just that shows that, it's not one person that can run a show. And so that just shows the unity of the district. And I felt like that was clearly shown here, which I just wanted to say. So thank you all for a great meeting. And thank you everybody out there.
I echo those sentiments. The only thing I'm going to say is I know that Halloween is coming up. And so I'm looking forward to the costumes and the parades that'll be happening at our schools. Obviously, make sure to be safe. I know that students will be, it's a minimum day that day. Students will be going out trick-or-treating, parents looking at the candy, if not just to eat some of it for yourself, for walking with your children. And then obviously, the next day is a school day. And so making sure that you get home in time and in bed so that you're up early and ready to be learning on I believe Wednesday is the first, right? So the Wednesday after Halloween. So I'm looking forward to some pictures from around the schools, and thank you all for being here tonight and or listening in. And thank you to my fellow trustees for basically keeping our focus on the best interest of our students and keeping our remarks concise. And with that, I'm going to be moving to persons wishing to address the board on closed session items. Do we have any? Awesome. And since we do not, I will be closing public comment there and moving on to convening to closed session. We will be convening in memory of Sue Baroni, mother of Tony Baroni, Director of Technology and Curriculum Integration. Can I get a moment of silence? And with that, we will convene to close session at 8:55 p.m. Thank you.